friends, it's Sophia and welcome to Sophia's Turning 50, where we embrace our age no matter what it is, but especially if we're turning 50. Today we are going to talk about acknowledging your grief during the holidays. And that is also a big topic for health and wellness, and also I'll be talking about the kids some in that. So that's pretty much all we're going to talk about today, but I still will have time for a 1980s show and tell at the end as usual. Okay, so it's kind of a heavy topic, and so before we get started on that topic, I have a couple of just little tidbits about that silly chemical peel that I keep talking about. So my face peeled a lot more on Wednesday. It was still really light, but it was kind of lots of flaky skin, and I was wearing a black sweater that day. And all day I kept noticing lint on myself, and I kept kind of picking it off and not knowing where it was coming from. And then, of course, in the afternoon, I realized that it was the skin flaking off my face. So that was kind of gross and embarrassing. Okay, so let's talk about the holidays. And I'm going to quote Dickens here and say, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. And it's great in many ways, and it's also not so great in many ways. And the not so great thing that we're going to talk about today is grief and sadness during the holidays. And the particular kind is when someone that used to be part of your holiday is no longer with us. And by that, I mean they are dead. So let's just get it out there. People have died in our lives. This year, I think, has been a doozy. I know last year was bad. This year, it feels like every month of the year, somebody that I knew died. And I swear the second half of this year, I mean, so many fathers died this year, but also mothers, and it's just so many people. And I have all these friends out there that have, an empty spot at the table, so to speak, during the holidays this year for the first time. And so I do want to acknowledge that and say that it's okay to be sad, and you should be sad because it is sad. And I think if you kind of allow that sadness to be expressed, especially if you have kids, it's a really healthy way to show them how to handle grief. It doesn't do anyone any good for you to just paste on a happy face and pretend, because it's going to eke out in other ways. And maybe you'll be snappish or less patient, or you're going to be really cranky and you're not going to know why. But when you get that icky, sick feeling in your stomach and you can't shake it, I suggest you just go in the bathroom and close the door and see if you might need to cry for a little bit, because that always makes me feel better. So speaking of that, we were kind of talking about people who have lost people this year, and you might expect that they're going to be sad this year. But I also want to talk to all the people who have lost family members or close loved ones long ago, because guess what? It's okay for you to be sad too, still, after all these years. You have just as much of a right to go in the bathroom and cry because you missed your grandpa who died 20 years ago as somebody who lost a loved one this year. I feel like the story that people told each other was that you should just get over it. They want you to be happy. It was a long time ago. And that's just not true. I know from personal experience that grief does not just go away. It kind of lasts forever, and you just learn how to live with it. And the more you give expression to it, and the more that you allow yourself to feel it, the easier it gets to live with. And so I will use my own experience, as I often do. My mom died 35 years ago, but I guarantee you that at some point on Christmas Day, I'll be closing myself up in the bathroom to cry for a little bit. And it may only be 5 minutes, but it's going to happen. And I accept that. And that's what I really want to talk about, is acknowledge that you're sad, accept that you're going to be sad, accept that it's okay for you to go, close yourself up for 5, 10, 20 minutes, an hour, however long you need. Or if you need to express it with people, express it with people. I kind of go either way. I cry all the time with my kids, so it's no big deal to them. It's just like, oh, mom's crying again. And also they're used to me being a little bit morbid. Speaking of morbid, and also kind of speaking about how grief and loss just lives with you forever. Recently I had the milestone. It was on December 5th. It was a date I actually had highlighted in my calendar, because on that day, my kids became 1 day older than the age I was when my mom died. So they're that on that day they were like 14 years and 44 days old. And that was one day long. That was one day older than I was when my mom died. And it was a really, like, I literally highlighted it in my calendar. And it's a day that I've been thinking of pretty much their whole lives because I was so determined that I'm going to stay with them longer. And I don't think it's much of a leap to think that the reason I'm so vigilant about my health is because my mom died young, and I run off to the doctor for every little thing because I am gonna, I was trying to live longer for my kids than she was able to live for me. And so I did it. I felt like I'd actually accomplished something. Like, I'm still alive. I can't believe it. I'm so excited. And also on the 5th, it was my 49th and a half birthday. So it was a milestone, and I talked with my kids about it at dinner. I said, you are now one day older than I was on the day my mom died. And they were like, okay, that's nice. Okay, mommy. Anyway, the point is, grief you don't get over it. That's what I'm trying to say. You don't get over it. If someone tries to, kind of talk to you about how you need to get over something, just tell them they're wrong. Because you don't, like I said, you don't get over it. You learn to live with it. And that doesn't matter if somebody died 20 years ago, if someone died 30 years ago, if they died, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, whatever, and whoever they were, you're not going to ruin the holidays because you take some time out to take care of your heart. Obviously, I'm not a psychologist, but I have been to hundreds of hours of therapy to work on all of these emotions. And so that's my experience, and that's what I wanted to share with you. Okay, I just listened to the audio on the previous section, and I realized that my kids are making noise in the background, and it sounds like somebody's playing the piano. And so if you heard that, that was on this side, and that's just what happens when you're trying to go find a little corner to make your videos, and everyone in the house is making noise. One more thing I wanted to say on the topic of grief is that there are also, I have a couple of books that I've read that have been very helpful to me by the author Hope Edelman. The first one I read was in 1995. She wrote Motherless Daughters. And then there was sometime around probably 2008, I read her book Motherless Mothers. And then in 2019, I was able to actually go to a Motherless Daughters retreat that she put on not far from here, and women from all over the country came who had lost their mother, when they were 20 or younger, or something like that. So that was really intense, but good and healing. And Hope also recently wrote a book called The After Grief, Finding Your Way Along the Long Arc of Loss. And I'll link to that, but I think that one could be, I haven't actually read it yet, but I think it could be really good because my understanding is that it answers the question to those people who say, aren't you over it yet? So that might be something good for you to read. And so the last thing I want to say, the very last thing I want to say on this is that when all of this advice and things that I'm giving on this topic is for people who just don't want to deal with their grief, but they know they have it, and they're, oh, I should be over it, and that sort of thing. But if you have kind of some ice age block inside of you that's very old, and you're actually kind of terrified of dealing with it, you probably need to see a professional as opposed to just, going off with a book in a corner and crying to yourself, because maybe you have something a lot more that you need to deal with. And I don't want to, I don't want to say that this advice works for everybody, but this is kind of for your, just typical, I should be a strong person, I don't want to deal with this kind of feeling. And my advice is you can do it, you should do it for those people. But if you have something more serious that you need to deal with, you should see a professional. And I'm happy if you want to private message me or something on Instagram. I'll put my Instagram contact information here to ask me about that. Like I said, I've had lots of therapy. I really like it. And so I'm happy to answer questions about that, if you're interested. Okay, the next thing is finally our 1980 show and tell. And for this one, we have to go shoot on location in the living room. So let's go. So this is my piano. And it's funny because I was planning on this to be the 1980 show and tell already. And then my kids just happened to be playing it in the background during the first part of the video. So that was fun. Okay, so I started playing the piano when I was 5. And sometime when I was around 8, I think we had like some interim kind of not very functional piano. And then when I was around 8, my mom took me to Dackbert's Music Plaza in San Antonio, and she picked out this piano and put a down payment on it. And I guess Dackbert's delivered it. I don't know how else it would have gotten to our house. And we went every month for like 4 years, 5 years, where she made her monthly payment, which is somewhere, I think it was like $32 a month. And sometime when I was around 12 or 13, she said, okay, it's paid off, now it's yours. And of course, by then, I think, I stopped playing when I was like 12, so in 7th grade. And so, she probably finished paying for it after I'd already stopped playing. But then when I was 18 and I moved out of the house, my dad said, you need to take the piano with you. And so I dragged it up to Austin, and it actually fell into major disrepair because I left it out on a carport for years. And then I decided that I was going to refinish it myself. And so then I started and then abandoned it. So then it was in really bad shape. And so when I had my first law firm job, one of the first things I did was get a professional to rebuild this basically from the inside out. All new strings, new soundboard or whatever it's called that's inside there, refinished all the wood surfaces. And I remember at the time, the piano guy was like, you could get a new piano. You don't, because it was like $4,000 and this was in 2000. And so he was like, well, you could just get a whole new piano. You shouldn't spend the money on this. And I was like, zip it and just fix this one, please. Because of course, this is the one I want. I don't want a piano. I want this piano. And when my kids were 5, I started them in piano lessons. It didn't go so great, but they did have a couple of recitals. But we mostly just fought about getting them to practice, and I just threw in the towel on that. Especially when they got to 4th grade, they did band at their elementary school, and I saw the benefit because they already knew how to read music. And so, they know how to read music. Julia sings, Lily plays in band still in middle school, and so I feel like it served its purpose. So there was a time when I was saying, okay, the kids played it, they're not gonna play it anymore. I think we can donate it now to a school or something. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And so here we are, I'm dragging it around still, even though it rarely gets played. And so now in my head, I'm like, well, maybe in 20 years, I'll have grandkids that can play it. So I'll just haul this around with me for another 20 years. So anyway, that's my 1980s show and tell. I'll talk to you again before Christmas, but I wanted to put in this grief and the holidays section because there's lots of things that can start to bring up grief, leading up to Christmas. And I wanted you to think about it and have time to almost make a plan for how are you gonna handle it when it comes up this year. So I hope you're able to do that, and that you have a great week. And as always, remember to embrace your age no matter what it is. Have a great week.